At some point, he stopped being readable. And that was the moment he became dangerous. Not dangerous in the way that anger is dangerous, or instability, or desperation. Dangerous in a quieter, more precise sense. He stopped needing the things that most people use to steer other people. He stopped responding to the withdrawal of approval. He stopped flinching at exclusion. He stopped adjusting his posture to match the expectations of whatever room he entered. And when a person no longer responds to those pressures, the social machinery that runs on them simply has no lever left to pull. Most people have never considered what it would mean to encounter someone like that. They recognize the stillness. They sense the distance, but they misname what they are looking at, calling it damage, calling it coldness, calling it a wall built by someone who gave up. That diagnosis is wrong, and the error is not small. Most people construct identity the way a building gets its shape from scaffolding. The scaffolding is external. The praise that arrived early, the affection that came without conditions, the selection that signaled worth before worth was tested. Those who were chosen first, promoted first, wanted first, tend to build their internal architecture against that scaffolding. They learn what they are by watching what others confirm about them. This is not a flaw. It is a common developmental path, but it has a hidden cost that only becomes visible under pressure. When the scaffolding moves, when approval shifts, when the group changes its mind, when the external mirror tilts, the structure shakes. Not always visibly, but the dependency remains. The need for confirmation never fully disconnects itself from the sense of self. That connection, quiet as it is a leash. The man this script is about never had that scaffolding. Not because it was taken from him, but because it was never offered in the first place. He was the second option in the team selection, the candidate who did not get the call, the person who watched others receive the kind of social credit that was distributed, not earned, distributed on the basis of charm, visibility, proximity to power, or the simple luck of arriving in the right room at the right time. He saw the system operate. He understood its logic. And then, because he had no seat at its table, he stopped waiting for an invitation and began building something else entirely. That process is slow, and it is not romantic. It does not happen through revelation. It happens through repetition without reward, through executing when no one is watching and continuing when no one responds, through making decisions in the absence of applause and learning to read results rather than reactions. What gets built in that environment is not bitterness. Bitterness is what forms when a person keeps waiting for recognition that never arrives. What gets built in its place when a man stops waiting altogether is something structurally different. It is the capacity to generate direction from the inside, to move without being pulled, to commit without requiring witness. This is where the misunderstanding deepens. When people observe this kind of man, they often interpret his self-sufficiency as coldness, as though the absence of need must mean the absence of depth, as though a person who does not reach for external confirmation is necessarily someone who has foreclosed on connection. That interpretation is wrong, and it is worth being precise about why. There is a meaningful distinction between a man who does not need anyone and a man who does not care about anyone. The first is sovereignty, the second is damage. Confusing them is a category error with real consequences, because it leads people to either fear what is calm or trust what is hollow. The man who was never the first choice did not stop feeling. He stopped performing. Those are not the same operation. Performing connection requires an audience. Feeling it does not. What he lost, or more precisely, what he was never given the chance to develop, is the reflex of performing need, the reflex of telegraphing want in order to secure a response. He never learned to manage people through apparent vulnerability, because that method only works on those who want to be needed. He never learned to manufacture warmth as a social currency because he had no market for it. What remains when those performances are absent is not coldness. It is legibility. He is precisely what he appears to be, and that is unusual enough to be disorienting. Here is the mechanism that most people sense but cannot name. A person who has spent years operating without favorable exchange develops a specific kind of perceptual calibration. He knows what indifference looks like dressed as interest. He knows what reciprocity sounds like when it is calculated versus when it is genuine. He has learned to read the gap between what people say they value and what their behavior actually protects, not through cynicism, but through exposure. He has watched enough patterns repeat to recognize them before they complete. This is not suspicion, it is precision. And precision, in the social field, reads to most people as threat, because it removes the margin in which manipulation usually operates. That is the actual warning embedded in the title. Beware not because he is dangerous in the way that resentment is dangerous, not because he is cold, broken, or incapable of investment. Beware because the conventional mechanisms of social control do not reach him. The fear of being excluded does not move him. The threat of disapproval does not redirect him. The withdrawal of warmth does not accelerate his compliance. Those instruments which govern enormous portions of human behavior simply do not find purchase in a man who has already lived without the things they promise to deliver. He cannot be managed through the simulation of belonging because he has made peace with operating outside it. And a man who cannot be controlled through need is, to any system built on manufactured dependency, genuinely uncontrollable. This is not a posture he chose as rebellion. It is the natural result of a particular developmental path. You cannot manufacture this through a decision to seem indifferent. You cannot perform this into existence through techniques of emotional detachment. What he carries is structural, and it took years of invisible construction to produce. The weight of those years is the reason his stillness is not an act. And yet, and this is the final inversion that most analyses miss, precisely because he does not need to be with someone when he decides to be with someone, that decision carries a weight that chosen people rarely generate. When a man whose self-sufficiency is complete turns toward a person, a project, or a commitment, he is not filling a vacancy, he is making a selection. There is no desperation in it, no void reaching for content. It is a directed act from a full interior, not a transaction from a depleted one. That changes everything about its quality. It changes its reliability. It changes its depth, because it cannot be undone by the same mechanisms that produce it. It was not produced by need, and need's removal cannot dissolve it. Most human connection operates as an economy of deficits. People attach because the alternative is felt as loss. They stay because leaving feels like subtraction. That economy produces connection that is technically real but functionally conditional. It holds as long as the balance of comfort and fear remains stable. Remove the comfort or remove the fear, and the structure often does not survive. The man who learned to need no one exits that economy. His connection, when it forms, is not a hedge against loneliness. It is a conclusion he reached through a different kind of accounting, one that does not collapse when the conditions shift. The years he spent building in the dark were not wasted. The absence of a stage did not mean the absence of work. The silence in which he operated was not a punishment that formed a wound. It was a condition that formed a different kind of architecture, one that does not require external load-bearing to remain upright. He does not owe that architecture to anyone who failed to select him. He built it precisely because no one did. The illusion was that being passed over was a verdict, that the hierarchy of early selection reflected something accurate about value, about readiness, about what a person was worth. It did not. It reflected visibility, familiarity, and the social comfort of choosing the already chosen. The real pattern is simpler and more severe. Systems reward legibility, not depth. And depth, when it is forced to develop without reward, becomes the one thing those systems cannot produce on demand. He is not waiting for recognition. He is not asking to be reconsidered. He has already moved to a place where neither of those things is the point. That is not indifference to the world. That is the clearest form of sovereignty available to a person who built his own ground when none was offered. You were never the first choice. That was never the loss it appeared to be.